The Eclipse Awards are designed to honor the best in thoroughbred racing each year with divisional championships. But the most coveted award is the last announcement of the evening. That is for Horse of the Year. In 2009, it was a very passionate debate regarding two horses, Rachel Alexandra and Zenyatta. In fact, it was so fierce that some voters suggested they should add a new option to the voting, and that was co-Horse of the Year. That was immediately turned down. So it came down to Rachel and Zenyatta. Rachel walked away with more than 30 votes more than Zenyatta. What was a close race actually was a runaway. If 2009 was passionate, I don't know how to describe 2010, white hot. Here to discuss this year's prospects for Horse of the Year, clearly coming down to Zenyatta and Blame, are Matt Carruthers, Christina Olivares, and Simon Bray. Okay, let's talk about the debate from this perspective. The year that each of these horses had. Make the case why Blame, in totality, not just the Classic, should be named Horse of the Year.
First of all, I sat here last year, and I was pretty emphatic about Rachel Alexandra. I thought she clearly should have been Horse of the Year, 8 for 8, beating males 3 times, 6, 7 different locations. I'm not nearly as emphatic this year. I don't have a real strong opinion this time around. I vote for Blame, but if Zenyatta won, I'd be fine with it. Last year, if Rachel would have lost, I would have been kind of upset with it. This year, not so much. But I think Blame should be Horse of the Year. He had 5 starts this year, 4 wins. There's only a handful of elite handicap races in the country, right? 6 or 7. Right. He wins the biggest one, the Breeders' Cup Classic, beating Zenyatta. He wins the Foster. That's one of the elite races at Churchill. And he wins the Whitney. And his only defeat in the Jockey Club Gold Cup was when Haynesfield got loose in the lead and the pace was ridiculously slow, and he runs second. So I think, his wins in the Foster, the Whitney, and the Breeders' Cup are better than any one single win that Zenyatta had the entire year.
Christina, why should they give Horse of the Year to Zenyatta when she got beat by the horse she's trying to beat out for Horse of the Year?
I think, for me, it comes down to something just a little bit more simplistic, I guess, and maybe I am oversimplifying it, but I think every year we have good horses that we'll talk about. There was Big Brown and there was Curlin, and this year there was Blame. Next year there will be another horse like those ones, another Big Brown, another Curlin, another Blame. Next year there won't be another Zenyatta. Maybe in 10 years there won't be another Zenyatta. Maybe in 30 years. I mean, you could go on and on. The Horse of the Year award is designed to reward greatness. I think Zenyatta is great, and to not give her the award is to not reward greatness.
She's the MVP of racing.
But is it right for the voting block to take this thing you can't totally quantify, which is what she did for the sport? You can't really say for sure exactly what it is in a number, and somehow let that factor in the voting.
Yeah, the problem with the voting system as we know it now is there's no clear-cut parameters on what the voters are voting on. They're sent the data, they're sent the past performances, but there's no real clear guidelines. But I think when you look back in history, everyone says that the Breeders' Cup Classic is the defining race, right? I mean, Matt made the case that Blame lost the Jockey Club Gold Cup because Haynesfield got loose on the lead. Well, Zenyatta lost the Classic because she was slow out of the gate and didn't like the dirt. There was the excuse. But when you look back at the Breeders' Cup Classic, the interesting stats is 14 out of the last 25 years, a Horse of the Year did not win or run in the Breeders' Cup Classic. So I don't think that's a strong argument. And you got 3 winners since 1998, Skipaway, Cigar, and Curlin, who got beaten in the Classic and were awarded Horse of the Year. Skipaway won the Classic the year prior and didn't get Horse of the Year. He was beaten out by Favorite Trick, a 2-year-old. So I don't think that the Breeders' Cup Classic has to be the defining race for me.
I think you can go, like you were saying, on strength of schedule throughout the year, but you can't go just on the Classic because Zenyatta won the Classic last year and she didn't get the award. You can't just say that's it.
Yeah, and I understand Zenyatta, the naysayers, say, well, she didn't beat anybody in those Grade 1 races. They're Grade 1 races.
Yeah, where else is she supposed to run?
Exactly. I mean, it's not her fault.
Well, she could have faced the boys this year. They could have run in the Pacific Class. They could have done some things a little bit more aggressively.
But just because she doesn't run the campaign you want, and that's part of the problem. The voting block is made up of individuals, and they all have their own preferences on what they want to see in a Horse of the Year champion. Some are going to be like that. She should have taken on a much tougher campaign throughout the year. And then others are going to be like, no, she raced where she should have.
Yeah, and you could dissect Blame's career if you want. I mean, this year, he won a Grade 3 at Pimlico. When he won the Foster, he beat Battle Plan. I mean, is he in the discussion for Horse of the Year, who was retired with suspensory after that? And then when he beat Quality Road, he was getting £5 from Quality Road. So, I mean, you could...
But he did beat Zenyatta. He won the race. I mean, that has to matter for something. And, I don't like the argument that, well, she was slow. I mean, he shouldn't be penalized because he's quicker and can place himself into a race better than Zenyatta. That shouldn't be a negative for Blame because she's slow early and 20 lengths back. And she was further back also because, again, over dirt.
That counters your argument with Hainesville.
The pace was very hot. She's going to be further back than she would be over synthetic races.
That counters his argument with Hainesville and the Jockey Club that, beating Blame. Blame wasn't quick enough to go with Hainesville.
Right. Here's the thing. That loss has to give you pause. I mean, as you pointed out, he didn't have as many starts as Zenyatta this year.
One loss.
Zenyatta never had a loss like he had. He was well beaten in the Jockey Club Gold Cup. I mean, if you look at the totality, I agree with you. I think last year, some who were impassioned that Rachel Alexandra had this historic campaign. You can't deny that, and you can't deny certainly what Zenyatta did. But this year, I don't think Blame's resume is that much better than Zenyatta, and Zenyatta's resume not necessarily that much better than
I think he had 2 more quality wins, and then he beat her in the Classic. And his point about how, if you win the Classic, that doesn't mean you're going to be Horse of the Year. Generally, that's when bombs win the Classic. When horses didn't have very good years, they're vol pony. They win the Breeders' Cup Classic. I mean, Blame was a solid horse going into that race, was your solid second choice. So, again, it wasn't like we had some 40-to-1 shot that was fluky and won the Breeders' Cup Classic. That's generally when the Breeders' Cup Classic winner is not Horse of the Year.
I think back to your original question, though, Todd, about can we use what Zenyatta has done for the sport in terms of the voting. I picture, the Eclipse Awards are January 17th. If Blame wins it on January 18th, when the headline comes up, if it's Blame is Horse of the Year, how do you explain that to the people that became horse racing fans because of Zenyatta? How do you tell them that what she did, that wasn't good enough? What she did this whole year, I mean, that's embarrassing for our sport to try and look those new fans in the eye and disappoint them that way.
I want to follow up on that because I have a lot of friends who have now come into the game because of Zenyatta and following her. And then so I started to explain to them the Eclipse Awards, and they said, what do you mean she's never been Horse of the Year? I said, yeah. And here's the part that bothers me for the critics that will not vote for her for Horse of the Year for the 3rd consecutive year. They are fine looking at her resume and saying she's good enough to discuss whether or not she's one of the greatest horses of all time, and they'll get in that debate, but yet she's not good enough to be Horse of the Year in either 08, 09, or 10. I don't quite understand.
Don't those things go hand in hand? Right? Great.
I don't see what you're talking about.
Here's what I'm talking about.
That will vote against Zenyatta, think she's one of the greatest of all time?
Yeah, they'll get in the debate, and they'll be fine with people saying her resume deserves for her to be in that discussion. They'll accept that fact, but then all of a sudden the resume is not good enough to be Horse of the Year in any given year.
I think most individuals that didn't vote for her last year and aren't going to vote for her this year don't think she's one of the greatest horses of all time. Maybe the greatest female racehorse of all time.
Let me ask you this. Is there also now, because there have some people who come out and said, I voted against her last year, and I think it was a mistake, and I'm voting for her this year pretty much no matter what going into the Classic. Do you think sentiment is so on Zenyatta's side that Blame doesn't have a realistic chance to be named Horse of the Year?
That's interesting. I don't know who's going to win. I think it's going to be really close.
I think if the
it's going to be really close.
If the Eclipse Awards were held 24 hours after the Breeders' Cup Classic, Zenyatta would have won in a landslide. I think as time goes on, that people make a case for Blame, and I think the sentiment maybe shift a little bit. So, yeah, I don't think it's going to be a landslide. I really don't. But if the awards were the day after, she would have won in an absolute landslide.
Christina, who do you think wins? Not who you want to win, who do you think wins?
I think Blame will win. I want Zenyatta to win, but I do think Blame will win because I think a lot of people do vote just on the numbers. Maybe I'm setting myself up for it because I'd rather be pleasantly surprised, but I do think. And I think it'd be interesting to ask top trainers, top jockeys, like, how do they feel? I saw a card that was sent to John Sheriff's where Alan Jerkins said, Zenyatta, I wake up thinking about her. I wonder what she's doing. I saw Citation. I saw Secretariat. She's the best horse I've ever seen run. I mean, Alan Jerkins' vote is enough for me. But I do think we're going to sit up there on January 17th, and I do think Blame will win.
And at the end of the day, ask yourself honestly, you've all attended Zenyatta's races. Does the fact that she makes Horse of the Year validate your experience anymore? It doesn't change the fact that you were there, you saw what you thought was greatness, and you experienced something that we may never experience again at the racetrack. So, yes, maybe she doesn't need it to validate her career, but many people are wondering, will it finally happen for Zenyatta, an Eclipse Award for Horse of the Year?